Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the Q&A portion of the Milton Film Festival. I'm Indira Naidoo-Harris, the host of the festival. Today, we are taking a look at the compelling suspense thriller, Girl. This is an atmospheric, gritty story about a young woman's return to her small hometown and her search for answers after discovering that the abusive father she intended to kill has already been murdered by someone else. Well, joining me now to talk more about this moody and intense film is the actor, director, and screenwriter for the film, Chad Faust. Thank you so much for joining us today, Chad. It is so good to have you with us.
Thanks, Indira. Thanks for having me here. Appreciate it.
Well, Chad, I have to start by telling you that this was one of those films that stayed with me for days. Honestly, it did. I found myself thinking about it often. So many layers, so much intensity. I think that really speaks volumes about this film. So I have to ask you, what is it that you wanted to say with this film? I mean, after all, it tackles, a lot of dark and difficult subjects,
hmm
and it was very compelling. What were you trying to say with it?
Well, I think the seed of the child was this idea of how our whole lives can be based on a false narrative. How we can, and that's obviously I think, very apropos to the political climates we're in right now as well. But and there's that moment in life when you suddenly see through, the matrix of your narrative and question it. And slowly your brain just does this like 180 shift, and suddenly nothing is what you thought it was. And I've had that moment in my life several times, and I've never really seen that explored before in depth. And so I wanted to sort of tell a very kind of emotional autobiography, but through a very, very different characters and in a kind of an imagined world. And for me, that was the core of it. And just this young woman who was wrestling with the idea of who am I in the story of that narrative, in the world of that narrative. And, I think we're all kind of trying to find out, who we are in the story of the world, and I found a young woman like her who has been given almost little to no guidance, and the guidance she was given was so corrupted. It's even harder for her, and so I just had a heartbeat for this person, trying to figure that out.
Absolutely. And that came through very strongly. And I think that's what this is all about. I mean, raw emotion, vengeance, anger, sacrifice. There's a vulnerability, of course, that the main character has that's hard to get away from. So I have to ask you, I mean, you're talking about how some of these themes, not necessarily those, but in terms of that sort of raw emotion was really intertwined with sort of you in some ways and discovering yourself. Was it hard to write this story and to write about those sort of raw emotions?
Well, I suppose because I came out of the acting world where you get so celebrated for your mess, maybe even over celebrated that you can become indulgent, which is the danger of that gift, I think. But so it wasn't necessarily like a scary thing as much as it was a motivator. I just felt like there's always that little bit of leap of faith that I think any author takes when you say, okay, that which is personal will be universal, which will be interesting and poignant for me, will be interesting and poignant to others. And you kind of like, oh, you hope that's the case, and you don't always know. But at least there'll be 100 people who will be moved by it, so it's kind of like, it's like that. And it wasn't necessarily terrifying as it was uh I just had to take a risk that that there was some gold in that history.
Absolutely. Now, the performances from the lead characters were incredible. I mean, and yet this was your first time directing a feature film, and I think that makes it even more amazing. So tell me, how were you able to get those remarkable performances out of Mickey Rourke and Bella Thorne? I mean, when I think about the two of them, I think about them as very different individuals. And really, I'm sure they probably approach their craft in a very different way. And so, you directing, you'd have to use some real strategies to be able to actually speak to each of them in sort of their own language. And so I have to ask you, what was that like, and how did you navigate through that?
Yeah, what you say is very apt. I think it's easy. I think a lot of directors coming at the job for the first time would kind of see like that there's one way to direct actors, and I think it's every actor is as unique as there are humans in the world, you know. And so I think from, you know, the decades I spent in acting classes, I'd kind of seen how different people, you know, I almost made like a practice over 15 years trying to figure out how people, you know, how people work. You know, I remember even just the actors I worked with, you know, as a young artist, you know, watching how they worked on set and trying to understand them was sort of a preoccupation of mine. But Bella was, you know, with Bella, it was the biggest thing with her was letting her feel that she had full authority to bring all of her story to this person. And really it was about permission, you know, and making her feel really safe and I kept telling her, like, you know, this person better than I do. And I'm so sorry for that, but let's turn that pain into art, you know? And that was kind of where we started. And so actually, by the time we were on set, I did very little directing with her. I let her rip, you know. I'd guide the storytelling. But as far as the character goes, I was quickly recognized that she had a great understanding of this person. And then with Mickey, you know, Mickey comes in with like this class 5 hurricane energy that you just go, okay, you know, I'm not going to get the character that I wrote, but we're going to get something totally different and amazing. And I just got to channel this hurricane, you know, and that was difficult because the character that I wrote was vastly different, you know, and in some ways more complex, but probably less terrifying. And so I had to recognize that he was going to bring a power that I was never going to be able to pull out of him or pull out of anybody. I just had to, you know, stay out of the way and just kind of beg to get some of my story in there. You know? It's enough that it worked, you know. It's a totally different experience.
Absolutely. And you know what? I mean, Bella's performance was really incredible. I mean, I think she just nailed that character. It just seemed to just flow. It seemed to us anyway, as effortlessly. You just bought it. You just knew she was that character. And Mickey's, you know, rendition of his performance was just like you couldn't stop watching him, you know, because you really, it wasn't a predictable performance, which brings such an energy, you know, in terms of sort of reality to something too, right? Because you know, it's not one of those, oh, I've seen this character before. No, he really brought some things to it that you weren't expecting. So I have to ask you, you're an actor, you're directing these actors, and you're also doing your own performance. Was it hard to be an actor directing actors? Was that kind of a journey you had to go through?
You know, for me, it's I guess John Patrick Shanley said it so well. He said, acting is writing, is directing, is living your life, you know. And there's a fluidness that I find in the symbiosis of those things, you know. For me, being an actor in the scene, as well as directing, it's like I get to direct from inside the material, you know, rather than being outside of it and trying to like shift things. I get to actually on a level of rhythm, and, you know, I get to kind of be in there affecting it. So for me, it's like one less actor I have to be concerned about, you know. Like I have a shorthand with myself. I know I can get the performance that I want, and I can actually kind of nudge things from inside and, you know, affect things. Like I knew the scene in the laundromat with Bella, I wanted there to be this almost like kindred magic between us, and I knew that Bella and I had such a great relationship at this point that there was like good trust, that I knew I could kind of, just by staring at her a little longer and getting her to look at me, I knew we'd connect. You know, this is a way I could actually direct from the point of view of the character.
And you touched on that very well in the film. I mean, it's very clear that they're attracted to each other, which the charmer, your character, actually talks about, and it was very obvious on the screen. So what was it like for you to understand and embrace this character, the character of the charmer? Because after all, you know, he has these boyish good looks, but at the same time, you know, he's not exactly a likable character. He's not a nice guy. So how
Right.
did you find that?
Thank you for boyish good looks at 40. It feels good. So You know, part of it was like I wasn't always going to cast myself. We'd explored some other people, and we just couldn't make it work. And my biggest concern was that the character would be played as one thing, you know, as a menace or as like, you know, I even took some meetings with actors, and I could just see people going down all the traps. You know, they were going down the road that led to all the traps. And so what I really wanted, you know, I think it's so easy to take a character like this and just play the effect on the person, which is just, I think, not, it's just going to give you a one-dimensional person and not be as dynamic. So what I really wanted him to think was that he just wanted so badly to be special, you know, and if he could make you think he's special, then somehow he has worth and value in the world. And so that creates like a human need it's quite corrupt though if you think about it. It's a strange, like his own narrative is crazy, you know, but I think we can all understand that. We all want to feel that a little bit. So I think that's hopefully as the audience, you kind of understand him. At the same time, he's just taking that into a place that's just not really socially acceptable, you know, and in fact taking it into a place that's, you know, sociopathy. So
Yeah, and that came through. He believes he's larger than life. He, you know, he loves that about himself, and he's just playing out, you know, this sort of character in this town in a very dark way. And that, you did a great job of really communicating that. Honestly,
he's kind of in on the joke a little bit, you know, like, you know, it gives him a little bit of, you give him a little leeway because like, oh, maybe this is all just for show. And then of course he doubles down and doubles down and doubles down. Like, oh no, I'm done with this guy. He can't, he's past redemption. You know?
Yeah. So I have to say that a large part of what's compelling about this film is the setting. You know, there is a stark kind of gray bleakness about the town and the area, and that feeling and that mood kind of really just takes over the entire screen. And it's almost as if the setting in some ways is a character in the film. That's the way I found it, and that's what I thought about. Was that intentional? Was that something you really?
Yeah. In fact, my intention was to go further with that. But when we got to Sudbury, Ontario, it's actually like, people have a lot of self-respect up there, and the town wasn't as broken as I had imagined. I mean, all of the decay there is urban. You know, it's all in the kind of the rougher parts of downtown. But you get into the country, and people have, you know, take care of their homes, because if they don't, you know, it's wet enough that nature will just take it back. So I actually, you know, when I got there, I thought, oh man, I can't, we have such a hard time finding the right locations. And I almost considered setting it in more of like the Skid Row area of Sudbury, because it was the only place that it was naturally kind of what I was picturing. But then there's so many implications about doing that it just didn't work. So my art department, God bless these guys. Alexis Dabad and David Morris are just absolute champs. If anyone's looking for people in the Toronto area, hire these guys. They bled literally for this film and created the world you see. And oh gosh, I'm so grateful to them. I want to work with them on everything. They created the world, you know, it wasn't really there. The house we built walls, you know, in that house, and you know, we did a lot. And so that was very much intentional. In fact, like I say, I wanted to have more like wide landscapes and stuff, but it just wasn't really there. You know, it's a lush green place, and we were shooting there with September. It was still pretty, you know, it wasn't the dry, I mean, because that was the drier time. But anyways, it was yes. Yes is the answer. But thank you for noticing. I like I say, the one thing I wish we'd had was just a little bit more of like the wide scope of the place, but you know.
Well, and that brings me to my next question, because I have a feeling that your shooting schedule, which was incredible, you shot this film in 15 days. I don't even know how you do that. I can't imagine what it would have involved. So, you know, what were some of the biggest challenges you had to face with this type of a shooting schedule? I mean, I'm sure there were things you may have wanted to do that you couldn't do, but I'm also sure there were probably some very real physical challenges. Tell me about that. What was that like?
Yeah, and it wasn't just the shooting schedule that was short, it was the prep schedule too. And because location scouting ran so late, we didn't have time to really even like storyboard based on our locations, so like we were fortunately Christopher Bennell, the cinematographer, and I had really found a shorthand with each other, and like, this guy can make beauty. Like, so many of those setups were done in like 12 minutes, like, we got to shoot in 12 minutes, do what you can, buddy. And he'd make it work. And like I said, we would be storyboarding. He and I would drive into set during the day, and we'd be figuring out the shots on the way into set, because there just wasn't time in the prep time, the prep schedule to adapt to the location. So we were figuring it out on the road, so it was insane. I don't know how the movie shouldn't be watchable, honestly, given the limitations, but just by pure grace and miracle, hopefully it's at least that.
Now, I want to just remind our audience that we are taking audience questions. So please, at any time, if you want to type in a question into the chat, we're looking forward to that. I see some of them popping up, and I'll move to those questions in a bit. But let's just carry on for a few more minutes here, Chad. This film is about the main character, girl. In fact, we don't even know her name, but we get to know her very, very well and really feel for her in many ways. The story is really about her journey back to her roots and finding out things about herself and her family along the way. But I couldn't help thinking when I was watching this film, and you touched on this briefly earlier on, that this was also a journey of sorts for you, because you're Canadian, you're coming back to Canada, you're telling a story set here, you're also talking about someone discovering themselves. This was your directorial debut, and and here you are, really going on this journey with the character, but also moving forward in your own journey. But I have a feeling you're also looking back on in terms of your path to this point also. What was that like?
Yes, you nailed it. I grew up in Victoria, BC, and I've been down in the United States for like 17 years. And this was like a very American story when I wrote it. And then, slowly we were going to shoot in Utah, and then Georgia, and then I think it was New York. And then eventually we were back in Canada. Like, it dragged me back to the scene of the crime in a way. But it's definitely an imagined story. But what felt personal was me trying to figure out who I was in, the story of my family, and specifically, I guess, the story of my parents, and it was so strange that, I'd been separated from my mom for 15 years when I wrote this. And right before we shot, I reconnected with her after 15 years being apart. And so now I actually feel bad about some of the way the mother is portrayed in this. And I had to really talk to my mom, make sure she knew this was fiction and everything. But one thing that came out of this was the girl doesn't quite get to the place of forgiveness in this story, but it's almost there. And I actually had shot her kind of saying something forgiving, and then I ended up cutting it out. It's just too soon for that. But my own story that carried on was that, you can find that healing and that forgiveness and that love if you're willing to, take that little leap of maybe having to be the first one to love, and if I was ever going to write a sequel, which I won't, of this, it would be the girl like coming home, and what happens there. But I think I've lived the sequel.
Well, and that's an interesting question in itself, writing a sequel, and why not? Do you just feel like this character is, you've captured her at a moment in her life that was best said in this story? Is that it?
I think so. I think from that point, it's so funny. Some people called this like a revenge story, and I would call it like an anti-revenge story. I think it shows the fallacy of revenge, that if an eye for an eye leaves us all blinded. I think we actually know that to be true now. And some of these like stories, like where the vengeful hero rides off into the sunset with the girl, I think we just know that's like a lie, and you have to heal through love, And so I think from this point on, I don't know. I think she's going to have a rough, bumpy, I guess if anything, the story would be her with that young man on the bus with the daughter, and learning how to become a parent herself, given that she had no great mentorship in that area, you know, and now trying to learn that, like one of the last things her mom said to her, which is my favorite part of the story, when she says like, look at you, you know, like our family holds a grudge. Look at you, you know, you're about to kill your mom. And you realize, wait, like the darkness that I've been fighting is in me, you know, and I carry this now, which I think is so important for us to learn, especially in this divisive time we're in, that, you know, change the world by changing you first. And I think that would be the story I would tell if I was going to do a sequel, is her wrestling with the parents that are now in her as she tries to become one herself, to this mini version of her.
But I think you were very successful in portraying that notion too, right? Of this struggle and the things that got her to where she is, and yet at the same time that you know, she sets out essentially to kill her father, but it becomes clear that that isn't really the solution. You know, there are these things happening to her, and it's a different kind of journey than she anticipated that she takes.
Right.
But also, I guess that that folks have to deal with when they're dealing with issues where they're thinking about revenge and so on.
Right.
I'm going to go to our audience questions just after this next one, but I noticed something in the film. You were very careful, I think, in the music you chose.
Mm-hmm.
And initially in the opening, I had this real feeling to some extent of sort of a First Nations narrative a little bit by the music you chose and a couple of other things that were happening along the way. I didn't quite see that thread carried on throughout the film. However, it is very much a part of the story when you're thinking about Sudbury and places like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to explore that with you a little bit, because I have a feeling that that was very intentional, and that you were possibly wanting to you know, introduce a subject matter into the story, or feel you know, through that music and through the other choices of music, which were quite different also.
Yeah, that's interesting. You pick up on the First Nations aspect of it, because I actually I wrote a like a brother film to this. I don't think that it doesn't quite work, so I don't think I'm going to make it. But it was very much about a First Nations casino in this in a very similar kind of town. And so it was funny that there's like these little crossovers. But yeah, I actually hadn't picked up on the influence on the music. That's I can see what you're saying now that you say it. The music was an exploration. I was going to do this sort of almost like gospel music through the whole thing, and it just didn't quite work, you know, once I put it together. And then it's really hard to find the right music, because the tone was so mercurial that as soon as you put music on it, you were really like putting it into something, you know. That I knew the music had to be as dynamic as my intentions were with the rest of the tone. So kind of started with these like old, I don't know if you noticed, but all the songs in there are really old, like John the Revelator, In the Pines, God's Gonna Cut You Down, all these old songs redone by my friend Joshua Stephen Hewitt. And I worked with him through like 9 versions of those songs to get them just on the right spot. And then we had some really wonderful kind of placed songs by some local Toronto talent, Louise Lamont, I think you say her name, and a bunch of really great people. But it was just trying to find that, like, something that could exist in a small town like this, but was also expressive of her inner heart, you know, and a little bit bigger than this world at the same time, and a little like a roaring lion, you know.
Well, I enjoyed the music, so you know, that was a really good lineup of songs that you did finally land on. Okay, I'm going to go to a question now. So a question from our audience: how did you get such big names to sign on to this film? You know, so do you have? I think that's a fantastic question. Do you have any, you know, stories from behind the scenes about how you actually got Bella and Mickey to sign on and convince them to do this film in Sudbury, Ontario?
Yeah, well, so the location of the shooting came much later in the story. They don't think they knew where they were going when they signed on. But so Bella came on. Gosh, I met her probably like 4 years ago. So I was originally making this with some other producers, and they had me doing like the Chateau Marmont Shuffle, which is like the big area in Hollywood where people do all their like, you know, big wig meetings and stuff. So I was meeting every young starlet in Hollywood, and one of them that I met was Bella. And when I first met her, I just couldn't. everybody else I met, they were gonna like put on this person, you know, and it was gonna be their Holly Berry and Monsters Ball moment, you know. I met Bella, and she had like, for her, it was like, yeah, I can do this, you know, and there was no putting on. It's like, oh my God, this is her. You know, and at first I felt like maybe this is like uncreative of me to just go with somebody who doesn't have to like work that hard to get there. So I kind of fought it a little bit, and the producers I was working with had a different vision. And so Bella really wanted to do it. She was texting me, and like I was getting like late night messages, like, you know, letters to her father. It was like she was really, you know, really wanted to do it. So I guess, and then eventually I had new producers, and I said, hey, what about Bella? And it was instantly, you know, I met up with her for Cuban food, and we just, by the time when we had our third Corona, we said yes to each other. You know, it was like that. But I think the big answer there is just, if you have a role that allows somebody to do something that they haven't been allowed to do yet, you know, but you know is in them, they'll go for it. They'll jump on it. Like I say, Bella fought for this role. So,
and what about Mickey?
Mickey was more difficult. Yeah, Mickey, like I always wanted Mickey, and I had a hard time convincing everybody that he was right for it at first. And so we were kind of exploring some other ideas. Like, this is Mickey Rourke. This is Mickey Rourke. I know this is. And I just had this like feeling in my heart that if he would say yes. And eventually I was like, guys, okay, enough. Let's just get the script to Mickey Rourke. And I remember I was like at the airport in Las Vegas, of all places, when I got the call that he was in, and I knew he was coming. I knew he was going to get on board. And I wrote him a letter. I don't think he read it. And I don't know why he said yes. I don't know, other than I'm not sure, but I think it made sense to me. As soon as I knew I had Bella and Mickey, I knew what the movie was going to be. It was going to be this very stripped and raw, you know, broken town, because both these actors kind of deal with angels and demons. I think they're both in kind of spiritual warfare themselves, as these characters are. And so I thought, okay, I'm just gonna shoot these people for who they are, and they have so much beauty in them, and that really defined what the movie was going to be. Two different actors, it would have been a totally different movie.
Absolutely, and great actors, great directing. You really got some wonderful performances out of them. Just wrapping up, you wound up having to deal with some of the realities of COVID during the last stages of the release of this film. What was that like? Because my understanding is it just came out just as COVID was kind of hitting. Did that have an impact on you and the film and how it moved forward?
Yeah, it was dramatic. You know, I mean, I remember like, gosh, it must have been like, March. You know, we were like shortlisted for the Cannes Film Festival, and Toronto TIFF was looking really, we were going to, all this was looking really, like we were kind of, and then Universal was circling the movie and all this, we had all this activity going on, and suddenly COVID hit, and it just went like, everything went away, and suddenly we're like, okay, our battle plan had been going one path, and suddenly we were in a worse state had we not had those options to begin with, because we hadn't been exploring other options. So suddenly, and then by the time we got into the movie theaters, thankfully we got into some, but it was Thanksgiving weekend, right as all the lockdowns came back in America. So we were like in drive-in theaters and everything, and I didn't even get to see it in the movie theater, which is,
oh,
so sad.
yeah.
But it was playing like 100 miles from where I am. I was going to drive, and right as the restrictions came back, so it just got pulled. So, it's maybe it'll be one of those 30-year hits. I don't know, but unfortunately, it got a little buried this year.
Well, but folks are seeing it, as you know, and I know. People are stuck in their homes right now. They're not able to do a whole lot, and so I think they're discovering films they haven't seen before. Discovering new films, and certainly discovering new directors and new, really promising and talented directors like you. So I have to ask you: this was an amazing directorial debut for you. What's next? What are you thinking about?
Thank you for saying that. I've got several projects that are going on right now. One of them is a film called Ballistic, and it's about a father who works at an ammunition manufacturing plant, who finds out he made the bullet that killed his son. And it's this wild journey of him trying to reconcile with that. And then I've got a couple of TV shows that I'm working on and a couple of new scripts that are just kind of too early to talk about. But and then I've got a big political thriller that I wrote, gosh, like 8 years ago. But we're trying to put together as well. So
I'd love to find out more about that political thriller. So
yeah,
that on your radar for sure. Well, this was really wonderful talking to you, and so exciting to hear what you're doing. So proud of you as a Canadian, and we all are. And seriously, it's always great to see important talent from our country do well, and your journey's not done yet. It's pretty clear that you're going to be a real force, and you should be very proud of this film. And it was a real pleasure having you on at the Milton Film Festival and joining us here today. I would just say to you, at some point when COVID is over, you need to come and check out Milton. I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, and thank you for those kind words. It's really, really touching. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you very much for staying, for coming here virtually, I guess, and being here with us. And until next time and your next film, we'll be really happy to chat with you about that one and see what else you have in store for us. Thank you.
Thanks.
And thank you to everyone out there today from the Milton Film Festival. Stay tuned, more great films to come, and we'll be talking about more of them over the next couple of days. So see you later.